Perfect. So I wanted to basically talk to you about a little bit of everything, what I've done previously and what I'm planning on doing in the future. And I'm going to be really selfish today for the next hour because I'm going to use this time to try to recruit some students. And it doesn't matter how old you are. So if you're currently a professor but want to come and be a student in my lab, that also works fine. So yeah, so let's start. So I wanted to talk about shock waves and dynamic fracture and sort of tell you the story how we ended up there. But let's first then look at what I want. I want students. So I want at least 2 graduate students to work on 2 of the projects that I will show you in today's presentation. So I need 1 student to work with me on shockwave dynamics. So we have an NSF funded project. And then we have a dynamic fracture project that we also want to keep working on. We currently have some really interesting stuff going on there. So if you know someone, or feel free to let them know that they email me at eliasson@minds.edu and use the subject shock adventures. So Muta, you went through basically my background here. So I'm from Sweden. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, feel free to use the chat room and holler at me or just interrupt. I promise I will not be offended if you don't understand my accents. I started off with shockwave focusing in gases here back in 2003. At 2007, I joined Caltech as a postdoctoral scholar. That was a little bit crazy because coming from Sweden, you've only heard about these schools. And to actually be able to be there was a fantastic opportunity. So I then got to work on shockwaves in liquids. And of course, when you have a liquid, you need to hold the liquid in something, and that something was some kind of solid. And it started fracturing when we had these shockwaves in the liquid. So that's how we got into solid mechanics. And I spent some time at USC and also at UCSD, and now I'm happy to be here at Colorado School of Mines. So I look forward to spending a long time here. So really, what we can do after, we can talk a little bit about what I've done. So I work on shock and blast wave dynamics. So we look at focusing effects to achieve extreme conditions at the focal region. So we also want to avoid collateral damage. So imagine that you have a target, you want to focus all your energy towards that target, and you can use shock waves to do that. We also look at shock interaction with free surfaces, and we also look at shock reflection of solids or liquids. We've done some fluid structure interaction. So underwater shock waves. So for example, what happens when underwater shocks hit naval marine structures, or blast wave interaction with structures. We've also done a little bit of work on high strain rate impact. So we have looked at fracture in polymers. I'm going to talk about that today. But we also looked at shocks in solids. So we looked at the bulk metallic glasses, and we compared 100% amorphous bulk metallic glasses to composite bulk metallic glasses, and the results for shock was quite different. It was very interesting to see. We have also, believe it or not, shocked brain cells from mice. So we built basically a brain in a dish. So we put 1 layer of cells in a dish, in a Petri dish, and then we filled it up with a layer of liquid and put a sort of a skull bone on top of it, and then we whacked it repeatedly from the top to see how these brain cells survived and recovered after these impacts. So bounce backward, forward, there we go. So you know, all these professors, they typically have some really neat way of describing how they ended up being a professor. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. There was no way around it. I still remember I was sitting in the couch watching Star Wars and realized I couldn't use the Force. It was kind of scary because I told my dad it was something wrong with me. I mean, what's going on? I can't use the Force. I can't be a Jedi. I'm ruined. What am I going to do with my future? So my dad said, well, maybe you can become an engineer. Then you can use forces to make the world a better place. So I said, aha, you're onto something. So that's how I ended up going to undergraduate programs in engineering. So today I want to talk to you about shock waves, and I figured that I would. Let's see if I can move this thing on my screen here. There. So I wanted to just briefly introduce to all of you what a shock wave is. I don't know, probably all of you already know. So this is a little bit of a repetition. So I would say that it's a thin, discontinuous region at which properties like, for example, pressure, temperature, velocity, and entropy make an abrupt jump from one state in front of the shock. So this would be in front of the shock here. Can you see my mouse moving on the screen? Awesome. To another state behind the shock. So this red dashed line here, that would be typical, sort of the ideal wave to have in a shock tube, where you can control everything. You have a constant cross-section area shock tube, so you can create this. Nothing happens, all of a sudden you have a shock, and these conditions remain constant for a longer extended time. However, if we release an amount of explosives in air, when this wave can move freely in 3D, then typically you have the shock wave, followed by a decay in pressure and other flow variables. And typically this dips below, so you get a negative pressure. So you get sort of a push-pull action here. And there can be multiple shocks coming back here up to the initial pressure again. So this is really what we're going to look at for some of today's exercises or experiments that we're dealing with. We have done shock tube experiments where we create this type of shock, much simpler to work with. And then we have some exploding wire experiments where we create this type of, the blue line type of pressure profile. So one might then say, well, shock waves, how interesting is that? It's probably just happening in man-made situations, like for explosives or maybe in labs. But let me tell you a story. So you wake up in the morning, right? The first thing you might do is go brush your teeth. So when you brush your teeth, you see the water coming down into the sink, and you have this fairly smooth region around here. And then you have an abrupt jump. This is a hydraulic jump, and this can actually be modeled using shockwave equations. So that's a shockwave right there. So that's the first thing you see in the morning, very cool. Then you might take your car, you might go on a trip. Later in the day, you might end up in Yellowstone National Park for some reason, and there's a bear. So everybody stops. So you can imagine that the guy further up here, he stops, the next one stops, the next one stops. And when one stops and the next stop and the next stop, that's actually a shock wave that's moving backwards in traffic. So we can model traffic flow too, using the same type of equations as we do with shock waves. And then even later in the afternoon, the rain starts falling, you hear thunder, you see lightning. So what is that? That's actually coming from a shock wave too. So when the lightning happens, it heats up the air so fast. It's like a piston. So the air gets pushed out very fast. So this creates a shock wave. But after a certain distance away from the center, it decays into a sound wave and it travels pretty far. So this is what you hear. So it was a decaying shock wave that you hear as the thunder. So that's where you can see shock waves in daily life. So it's not just in man-made places. So then I want to show you basically a little bit about shock dynamics. So these results that you see here on the side, and these are numerical simulations, and I just wanted to show them because they look pretty. Oftentimes we think science is full of equations, it's not very beautiful, but I like art too. So I figured that this picture, even my mom, who doesn't know anything about science or engineering, she loves this picture. She's like, this is very pretty, Veronica. And that makes me happy when I hear her say that. So this is the case when you send a cylindrical shock wave that crossed, you only see a quarter of this scenario right here, approximately a quarter. And the shock has reached past these black obstacles. So these are cylindrical obstacles. And it reached all the way in here at this point. And you see all these shock interactions. There's vertical structures. There's all kinds of fantastic things going on. Actually, what happens here is that you see light. So when you do this in an experiment, it's almost like an exploding star. It's very interesting. So we did experiments, and we also did numerical simulations. So why would anyone care about shockwave dynamics? I mean, have all of you heard about this area, research area before? Maybe not. It's fairly small. I'm going to show you in the next slide. But for example, shockwave lithotripsy. Some of you might have had kidney stones. Actually, one of my friends had a kidney stone a couple of weeks ago and was in a lot of pain. And what happens is that if you do shockwave lithotripsy, you can then send multiple shockwaves from this type of shock generator onto the kidney stone. And then after thousands of shocks, the kidney stone has been pulverized into small particles that the body can pass on its own. So this is a non-invasive procedure to take care of kidney stones. Of course, it would be cool I think, if you could make it even better, because right now you could also create some bleeding, you create some damage to the tissue that surrounds the kidney stone, because you only have one shock generator. So I'm thinking about maybe we should have multiple shock generators so that we can say, given a certain kidney stone shape and size, then we can tune the shock generators in order to have a perfect, more of a squeeze of this kidney stone. Another example, which is a little bit more violent, you might have heard of inertial confinement fusion at National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore, where they have a pellet, a fuel pellet, and they use powerful lasers to create waves to basically squeeze the pellet and release shock waves inside this fuel pellet so that we can get fusion that happens. And here's also a question about how many shocks are you using and how is the shock dynamics of these shocks interacting as they travel inwards inside this pellet. So we think that here are two examples then that could illustrate why shock dynamics is important. There are of course other ones, and if you get to talk to me another time, I'm sure I'll bore you to death with other things. So if we start by looking at this picture here on the right, I put basically timetable. So we started with shock focusing back in 1942. In 1950 was the first experimental work that we know of on shock focusing. This was by Perry and Kantrowitz. And I picked out the big players in this field and lined them up like so. So back until approximately 2016. And it's kind of sad that you can fit most of the big players in this area onto the vertical portion of a slide, that there aren't thousands and thousands of people working in this area, but it's rather few. Anyways, so if you want those references, I'm happy to give them to you later. But shock focusing could happen when we propagate through non-uniform or moving media, when we have shock reflections from curved surfaces, or when shocks interact with other shocks. So it could be multiple shock waves. So of course, what we're going to create is extreme conditions, high pressures, high temperatures, high densities, and this could be really interesting. But it can also, we can see it as either beneficial or detrimental. So the beneficial part would, for example, be shock lithotripsy when we destroy the kidney stones. But you can also imagine that we use this for defense purposes, to destroy certain things that are that we don't want to keep. So how do you focus a shock wave? That's a good question, right? So one way to do it, which is fairly simple, is to build a long tube. So you have a tube like this. You put a conical insert at the back end. So you put a cone inside. So that's this white dashed line here. So it's in 3D, it looks like a cone. And then you have the red part here. This is called the driver section or the high pressure section. So between the driver section and the low pressure section, which is also called the driven section, you put a membrane of some kind. So you can put a thin aluminum membrane or some plastic membrane or something, and then you fasten these two parts tight together. After that, you raise the pressure inside this driven section until you reach a desired pressure. Then you puncture the membrane somehow. It could be through mechanical means. You could, for example, have an arrowhead that you shoot out and it punctures the membrane and it breaks. Or you could already have a knife insert, say like you have four knives that sit in there at some certain radius of curvature. And when the membrane then bends, it eventually touches those knives and will open up on its own. So after that, you will have pressure waves that propagate downstream this tube, and pressure waves are going to coalesce, multiple ones. So eventually a few tube diameters downstream, you're going to have a shock wave that starts to propagate. So if this shock tube is cylindrical, you're going to have a cylindrical shock, or basically a pancake-shaped shock wave that travels down the tube. It hits this conical insert. So now you're going to create a donut-shaped shock wave. So it climbs around this conical insert, comes around the end, and if you leave the end part open, it has nowhere else to go but to collapse onto itself. And then we can use optics. So we can look at through the rear end of the shock tube. We can somehow, some smart way, get some laser light into the shock tube and have it shine out. And then we can do all kinds of visualization techniques to see what the shocks are doing. So that's what I used during my PhD thesis. It was kind of fun to build this and to make it work and to run it. I did not have a high-speed camera. So I just want to tell the students that are listening, you're oftentimes, we need a high-speed camera. And I said, yeah, we sure do, because I did thousands of experiments in this tube. I was actually planning to steal the tools that I use to fasten these nuts and bolts all the time here, but I didn't. I left it in the lab. So the next thing we can ask ourselves is, how do we see shock waves? Because if you just look at them with your naked eye, you're not going to see them. So you need to play tricks with the light, and you need to play tricks with the camera then. So here's what the typical setup would look like. Here's our shock tube. So we see this from above. So basically a little bird sitting in the ceiling of the lab. We have a light source of some sort. This light source would sit at the focal length distance away from this concave mirror. And then we bounce the light into a flat mirror. We bounce it through the test section of the shock tube. We take it back out on the other side with a flat mirror, another concave mirror, and then we just bounce the light back into the camera. So typically why we set it up like this is that we want to keep the expensive parts, which is the high-speed camera. They can cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these concave mirrors are quite expensive. We want to keep these guys further upstream, so there is no shocks or nothing hitting those guys. But these mirrors here are not as expensive. So if things would fly out here, it wouldn't hurt these mirrors as much. So what we do now is that we create a parallel beam of light that goes through this test section. And we have a parallel beam of light. There's a density change, a pressure change, or something else that changes the index of refraction. It's part of the light that came parallel through is going to take off at a different angle. And we can focus all this light to come out. So we can focus it either somewhere here or somewhere here. And then we can use a knife edge, which is basically just, you can use a pinhole, or you can use a razor edge, and you can cut off part of the light so that you create a grayscale image so that you can actually see the shock. So you can see all these areas where they get higher contrast, where you change the index of refraction. So we get these beautiful images. So these images might look like this. So say here again, here's a shock wave that was initially cylindrical. It's traveling inwards like that. And I put some obstacles in its way. So these are also cylinders. And at the beginning, you can see that you have a curved side here. You have corners and then curved sides. As the shock is propagating inwards, these sides become more flat. So more flat, but you still have 8 sides and 8 sides. However, at the time instant later, you're going to have 16 sides. So you went from an 8-sided polygon to a 16-sided polygon. And what happens is that when 2 shocks meet at a corner, a new shock is going to propagate out there. And this is stronger than the previous one, so it travels faster. So it's going to overtake and eat the previous shocks on either side. And eventually what happens is that when you had a flat side here, you're going to have a corner down here. So now you have a complete reconfiguration. So depending on how the geometry of your setup, you're going to see as many as you want of these reconfiguration stages. And then the shock focuses, and when it comes back out again, that's the shock front. It's circular. Wait, how cool is that? So it came in as a polygon that's just reconfiguring the whole time, and it goes out as a circle. Whoa, you're like, whoa, how cool is that? Sorry, I'm making fun of this, but it turns out that shock waves that are going outwards, they're expanding, are stable by nature, but shocks that are focusing are unstable by nature. So the smallest disturbance are going to create these types of corners and different shapes, but on the expanding type shock, you're always going to see this nice spherical shock. So why do we do this? Why do we create these multiple different shocks and reconfigurations? Well, it turns out that if you look at this reconfiguration here, this is from a numerical simulation. You start off with a corner, you get a plane side, and then you become a corner again. Every time that you go across, say, one of these lines, every time you get a new shock here, you're going to get a stronger Mach number. So a stronger Mach number, higher Mach number, higher Mach number. Sorry, I have a cat that's walking all over the place here. Move, move. So that's one way to create shock focusing. So you can increase the strength of the shock. So you can make more oomph of what you have. So that's what we try to do. So now imagine that you have these shocks that are behaving like this. And then you have a naval vessel. And you might have convergent parts on this vessel. Say that you have a part that looks like this, and you have a shock that's coming in, hitting this convergent part, and it's going to focus somewhere close to the focal region of that part. So is it going to make it? Is it going to break? So we started to become interested in underwater explosions, and this is after moving to Caltech. So I want to show you an underwater explosion. This is from torpedo test at an Australian Navy. So at this case, I'll play the video. You see the explosion. There's lots of stuff going on, things flying around. The torpedo did not hit the ship. It went way below. So the ship is up here, and down in the water is where the explosion was, but the explosion hit the ship. And look at that. What an efficient way to split a ship in two parts. This is not good if this is your ship. Well, it's great if it's the other guy's ship, but not your ship. So of course we were interested in seeing how can we look into different settings of marine structures and underwater shock loading, because these tests are extremely expensive. So we were asked by the Office of Naval Research to come up with a small experiment. So this was basically you can put it in a backpack and walk away with it, except for the gas gun that you're using to load it. I put two pictures here. So basically what you're looking at is two still pictures taken with a Canon camera, the regular camera that any tourist runs around with. You probably all have one at home, a DSLR camera. This is a projectile coming in here from the left of the image. It hits a piston. There's a piston sitting here, and here, this shape that is outlined here, wedge-shaped. Inside there is filled with water. On the outside, we have a polycarbonate material, and we're also looking through the picture. So if you imagine going through the screen, you have polycarbonate windows on either side of this to make sure that the water doesn't come out. So we were interested in looking at shock and fluid interactions in this type of shapes with different wedge angles and different curvatures and so. So we said then, okay, let's shoot this projectile onto this piston. So we generate a stress wave that goes through the piston into the water, and when it comes into the water, it's a shock wave. The shock wave is right here in this picture, and you can actually see the shear waves that it's sending out into the polycarbonate material. You can also see the pressure wave, which is ahead of these shear waves inside this polycarbonate material. Here's a picture taken at a later time instant. So you now see that we focused the shock wave came in, bounced back, here it is on its way out again. And we have this huge pressure pulse, and it goes into this material, and that's what the Navy was worried about. So this is what we decided to work on. And of course, what happened here was that this piece, this polycarbonate piece, it broke. Multiple parts came apart. So that's how we got interested in fracture mechanics. So dealing with dynamic fracture is quite interesting. Those of you that have done quasi-static fracture, you know there's lots of standardized testing. Most people know how to deal with things. I feel like the dynamic fracture community is a little bit of the wild, wild west. We do a little bit different things. I do it this way, you do it this way. Cool, we're friends anyways. But really what we're interested in is, say, different types of modes. Most typical in structural engineering would be mode 1, most dangerous, when we have this opening mode. Mode 2 is important when you have composites or other types of structures where, say that you have fibers in this direction here, so that you can actually sustain a crack that grows in between the fibers due to shearing. And of course, you can have out of plane shear. So, naval vessels and dynamic fracture and shocks. So here you see a picture from 2008. These experiments are extremely expensive. They drop explosives closer and closer to the ship, pull it back up on the shore, or to the harbor, and then look at it again to see if it sustained any damage. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Here's another ship, which is fairly new. This is a Norwegian, it's a patrol vessel. It's made of composites, so it's very fast. It's a mine hunter. So this type of material is interesting because we know fairly well how steel responds to these dynamic loads and impacts and stuff, but composites, polymers, wow, what's gonna happen there? And then you see this picture here to the right. This is a picture of a ship that broke. This is Wheelstar. This was damaged due to wave slamming. And wave slamming is very similar to shock load. So you have your ship, you slam it with waves repeatedly. And if you look at the pressure profile left behind by this event, it looks very similar to a shock. So this is sort of the scenarios that we were interested in looking more into. So we're interested then in shock and blast. Some people work on implosion. We haven't done that. And of course, this applies to wave slamming too. The ocean is a horrible place to be in. It's very aggressive. There are chemical reactions, there's seawater, there's impurities, there's going to be cavitation. You're going to have temperature extremes. Imagine that you're in Hawaii one day and then you're in the Arctic a few months later, and you go back and forth, back and forth. Humidity. Are you going to have also water uptake into your actual parts? What would happen then? Does it respond the same way as a pristine material that just came out of the lab? That's have a happy life in a dry lab. So in order to do these experiments, we decided then to use a gas gun. So it's the one we have in the lab currently is 7 foot long, the barrel. Inner diameter is, excuse me, 2 inch, and we shoot all kinds of projectiles through it. We put the specimen inside this catcher box, and we use a catcher box to keep equipment and students safe so that whenever something gets hit inside here, it doesn't go everywhere and hit anyone to hurt someone. And then again, we use the same type of visualization techniques as before. So we have the light, the concave mirror, the flat mirror, mirror again, and then a few more mirrors and lenses in a high-speed camera. The cool thing with this system is that we can use multiple types of visualization techniques. It's not just for Schlieren optics to see shock waves. We can actually use photoelasticity, we can use caustics, we can use coherent gradient sensing techniques, or other types. So it's a very sort of versatile system. So here's an experiment that I'm going to play. This is filmed from an iPhone just to show you what it looks like, filmed from an iPhone. We of course have also a high-speed camera looking at this event. The 2 students that worked mostly on this is Rodrigo and Orlando. Well, let me play this video. So I'm looping this video over and over again. You see a polycarbonate plate sitting in here. We have 2 notches there and there. Shooting a projectile on this, and then trying to see how the cracks grow before everything breaks. So we could, of course, use photoelasticity. So here you will see the projectile coming in from the right. Here is a plastic sheet with a hole inside. So I just wanted to show you what photoelasticity looks like. Get all those beautiful fringes. You can see the cracks growing. And you can, of course, if you have a dedicated student, ask them to quantify what is going on inside this piece. I haven't yet asked anyone to do it. I felt like it was very complicated. But that's one way of doing this. Let's play it from the start again. So the projectile comes in, hits, and then you get all these cracks growing and all these beautiful stress states. So the stress is changing across each fringe, and you know what the stress on the edges are. So you can correlate this with some material properties and what your setup is doing. So that's one way of doing this, to get some quantitative data. Another way would be to use caustics. So here's the gas gun, here's a sample. But then shine, oh, okay, it's the wrong picture to the right title. So this would be for the DIC, Digital Image Correlation Setup. So this is what you do, you take the sample and in your speckle pattern, put the speckles somehow. So typically we spray painted white, and then we put black speckles on top. And then we have high intensity LEDs that shine on some spot of interest on the sample. And then we launch at it and we look at it, see what happens. Here's what caustics look like. So we have a compression wave through the sample. There's going to grow a caustic, so that white that circular part there, that's what's called a caustic. Let's play it one more time. Go back, play. So first a compression wave, and then we're gonna grow right here when we have tension, and there the cracks take off, and it keeps growing. And by measuring the diameter of this dark shadow spot, you can correlate that to different stress, say a stress intensity factor, different types of crack parameters. This is a very old-fashioned technique. You know, when I go to conferences and I say that this is what I do, people in the audience go like, what are you doing? So you see, everybody wants to use digital image correlation because it's the new sexy technique, but I say, hey, this is like driving a Volvo. It's always gonna take you where you want to go. It might be slower, it might not be so cool, but you will get there. The DIC would be the fast, cool Porsche. So we did this underwater. We built a little aquarium and we looked at the caustic through the water, and it actually worked really well. So we could also look at the crack propagation in polymers underwater. It looked something like this. So we built a little stage that could move freely, because the first time we built it fixed in time, and we hit it, and then we got crazy results, and we realized we have added a lot of mass onto the sample. So we had to take that into account. And then we compare the different responses when we have air surrounding the sample and water surrounding the sample. And we saw that the water acted as sort of a dampener for all these oscillations and behaviors. And of course, DIC, here's the typical speckle pattern. We have a crack here or a notch here, and then we're gonna hit the specimens, and we're just gonna start all these different videos. It's gonna look like Christmas for those of you that celebrate that, with all these green and red colors. So you have displacement in the X direction, displacement in the Y direction, strain in the Y direction, strain in the XY direction, and then the original image. And what we're interested in is this crack here. We don't care about anything else, but we're interested in seeing how this crack initiates and how it grows. And doing this with DIC is quite complicated, because typically you buy a DIC software, which is quite expensive. You might pay a lot of money for it. So the question is, can we do this in a better way without having to pay so much money for it? So when we did this, we compared dry samples that have been happily living in a lab shelf with the samples that we soaked them for a long time with accelerated aging. So that basically we just increase the temperature of the water bath so that it looks like this has been a ship, a piece of a ship that's lived in the ocean for maybe 10 years. So we looked then at the different stress intensity factors. So I'm showing you 3 different graphs here. We repeated experiments multiple times for each type. So we had soaked samples, and then we had naturally aged samples that were just sitting in a box of water for a really long time. So I think the graduate student that's done this work is finally happy to graduate this December, that he doesn't have to keep an eye on whatever else grows in this water during this long time. It takes about a year to reach the same amount as we can do in about 20 days when we increase the temperature. What we saw was the critical stress intensity factor changed remarkably. So from about 35, 36 megapascal square root meter to 26 and 25. So this is much lower than this. So if we have a water-filled sample, say that your fancy coating on your ship has been eaten up by UV radiation, then you have to worry about these things when you design and build the structure. So the water absorption decreased. This is the case for mode 2. Fracture toughness, about 30%. So that's a huge number. It's not just a little epsilon, it's a huge number. But on the other hand, the soaked samples and the natural age samples, they showed no difference. So we didn't hurt the samples by soaking them. We didn't have too high temperature. And then, you know, I got tenure, which is awesome. And then I went back to start doing shock focusing again, because, you know, they say during tenure that you have to do other things that you didn't do as a PhD student. You have to show yourself that you're great. And I was like, let me do it again, but do it differently this time. So we built this exploding wire box. We have it in the lab, so if you're interested, feel free to come by. We have different test sections, so we can explode wires in 2D and in 3D. The students who worked on this were Ben, he's still at UCSD, Jackie, he's now at Stanford, and then Barry, he is at Caltech right now. So we use the same Schlieren system, and these are 2 wires, and you can see what we're tracking here is actually that extra shock that builds in between the 2. That is the one we're interested in. How fast does that grow? And this movie is here in 3D. We see the same thing happening. So that's something, again, we're interested in. So this is what I would like to have one student working with me on, if you're interested in telling your friends about this wonderful, cool experiment that someone needs a student to work on. So how do we track these shock waves? Well, we created this whole automated algorithm where we correct any distortions from the optical setup. And then we do morphological manipulations so that we can find the shock itself and remove all these different noise that we have. And then we can track them. So we discretize the image into multiple small cells. And then we decide if the different shock segments belong to the same shock or a neighbor shock. And then we add them up using linear segments. And then at the end, we can then have shock fronts that belong to different shocks, and we can track them individually, depending on how many there are. And of course, this is really helpful because now we can automatically just input these images into our MATLAB script, and we can track, for example, the vertical position of the Mach stem. So where is it? How fast does it grow? And also the horizontal span. How fast does it grow horizontally? And this is basically real-time tracking that this MATLAB script is doing. So it's fairly okay compared to you sitting there clicking on the pictures to measure stuff. Oh, look at the blue picture. What is that? Well, this is the same thing. You see the incident shock, the Mach stem, an incident shock, and 2 reflected shocks. This is taken again with a Nikon DSLR camera and using color filters to look at the different gradients. So one could do this too and get more quantitative data out of the image than just having a position of the shock. But the requirement is, of course, patience, because you can only get 1 picture per experiment. So it means that you have to run multiple experiments. One can also use this type of work to look at cityscapes from above. So we started with a 2D cityscape. We put some obstacles into our test section. We started it off with a single wire explosion, and it hits these different buildings. And you're going to create these different shock interactions. The shocks meet again. They focus onto certain places. And you can compare that with simulations of the same scenario. And then, of course, you can evaluate these simulations in a sense so that you can see where do the high pressures occur, where is most likely the structure going to be damaged. And we had, again, a bunch of wonderful undergraduate students working with us on this project, and they actually published a paper when COVID hit. We decided to do something, and we decided to write up the results. So if you're interested in learning more about this, then you can see what Jane, Janelle, Kevin, Jorge, and Xander did by reading that paper. So that's pretty much it. So then one can ask, what are we going to do in the future? Is there anything left to do? Oh, there's so much left to do. So shock dynamics, we're looking at, for example, reduced order modeling. So we're modeling these spherical shock waves and trying to come up with a very fast code that only cares about the correct position of the shocks and when they transition from being 2 shocks that meet into the extra Mach stem. We want to keep on working on the dynamic fracture experiment using woven composites, very complicated structures. But then use high-speed X-ray diagnostics to see how the cracks are growing in between the different layers of fibers. We're also interested now in optical techniques. So we want to replace DIC with optical flow concepts, and this is a concept that comes from computer scientists. And basically, we're going to use machine learning and neural networks to track, first of all, where is the crack tip? And then how do you automate? What is the stress intensity factor? Is it in mode 1, mode 2? When does it switch, etc.? And BLAST, we're interested in continuing the work on traumatic brain injury. We just submitted a proposal to NIH for ocular injury, so injury to the eye due to blast wave, and safety of any kind of structures. It could be underground mine structures. When you have an explosion, how does the explosion travel and propagate in the different tunnels, to columns and retrofitting buildings for nearby blast waves. So that's the future. And you guys have been fantastic. So I just want to remind you, please come work for me, okay? And I want to say thank you to all of you for listening. And I'm happy to asking, I can ask you questions too, but answering any question that you might be asking. And of course, thank you to all the students that have been doing all this work that I get to present. So thank you, everybody. Happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Dr. Eliasson. This is very informative. Audience, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, but before you start, we have one already in the, I think it's more of a comment. Joe says, I presume one could simulate the effect of Beirut explosion on the city.
Absolutely. It's a great example because you could build an exact 3D model in a very easy way. You can 3D print the obstacles and then you can just go ahead and do it. So it's easy to get the visual what the shock is doing, but you can also put pressure sensors and other types of techniques to see what's going on wherever you're interested in measuring the effect of the shock. Oh, I see a question here in the chat. How does the shock wave move in absolute vacuum in space? Have you been talking to Tony by any chance?
Not yet, but you know, as part of the space mining, we're beginning to think about this.
Yeah, so here's how I see this. So there's been several research projects. I haven't done it, but there are other people that have done it they built basically shock tubes or different types of chambers where they have first a shock wave and it enters into a vacuum section, and then they see how the shock propagates through it. And as long as you have something feeding the shock from behind, as long as you have material to carry the shock is going to propagate, but it's going to diminish and to mitigate very fast.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you might worry about shrapnel and things that are going to fly ahead of the shock if you have an explosion of some kind. So you're always going to be throwing stuff. But there are other types of shock waves too that travel in space. So for example, when you have supernova explosions and you have electromagnetic waves, so all these different types of waves are also traveling in space. Yeah. But yeah, I think so. So as long as you have something feeding the shock, it's going to travel.
Otherwise, it would dissipate, right?
Yeah, it dissipates very quickly. So there's probably some estimates, which I don't know off the top of my head, how quickly they dissipate, but it wouldn't be too hard to set up an experiment to run like a specific scenario. So if you have something in mind, if you're interested in it, just chat with me at some point. We'll go grab a cup of coffee or tea and we'll see what we can set up and run it, because I just like shock waves. They're pretty fun to work with.
Okay, sounds good, we'll do.
Cool, thanks.
I have another question from Joe. Do electromagnetic shocks behave the same way?
This is interesting because I don't know. I'll just kind of bounce the question back at you. I don't know if they do the same things, because so mainly what I'm interested in is this interaction of if you have, like if the shock is shaped differently and get these reflections, and I don't know. So my ignorance, sorry, but I can probably figure it out and then we can talk about it later. So feel free to follow up. You have my email or you have our Instagram account there. You can always send me a message right there.
Any extra questions? I know Dr. Eliasson covered a lot of topics. Yeah, Lucas, please.
Hey, Veronica. Sorry for being a little bit late, but really cool talk. I really enjoyed it. I was just wondering, I think you kind of alluded to it a bit, but maybe in a bit more detail, what do you think is like the future of this going to be? I mean, if space is going to be, that doesn't sound like that sounds to be the most interesting part to you, but what do you think out of all those topics? What do you think is the most promising domain?
So I think there's plenty of promising domains, mainly because a lot of the shock and explosives work is very empirical. People know how to do things. They just, like say mining also, there's a lot of knowledge that is passed from generation to generation, but the scientific part, I think, is lagging behind to some degree, especially when it deals with shock waves. So I'm thinking that I see space, shocks in space and explosives in space is a big deal. But also I think the biomedical, like injury type mechanisms to look at that under controlled forms is going to be huge. So I spent the last couple of weeks reading about just traumatic brain injury and ocular injury. And what surprises me is that people often report, here's injuries that happen to these, say they use some kind of porcine eye or a cow eye, and they subject this to some blast. But they don't tell us what the loading was. Some people only report a blast overpressure, which to me doesn't mean much, because I also need to know, like, what did the wave look like? What is the pressure impulse? Was there a negative phase? How many negative, positive phases were there? So I need to know all of those things in order to figure out, if you have an eye with all these different layers, soft layers, is there shearing? Is there cavitation? How many pulses is there shock focusing inside? And I think there's a lot to do if you come at it from the mechanical or mining engineering society, where you know more about these things, and then team up with, say, doctors and biomedical folks to do a lot of this work. I think that would be very cool. But yeah, definitely space, speaking with Dr. Konya about that. So that seems something that's also promising for the future, for sure.
Cool, thanks. Can you, the ocular injury type, is that something where you would be looking into how those injuries actually occur, how they happen, or is it something where you actually look into a treatment strategy, or what is the aim of that?
So the team that we put together is, so I will do the loading and looking at like the mechanical response, different layers of the part, trying to put particles inside the eye to track them, and also definitely to see, we're focusing on the optical nerve, because not many people have even included it in their models. And then we are teaming up with people that do computational analysis so they can do some predictions. And then after that, we are having also medical doctors that are going to scan the eyes and give us some hints about protective gear, because the shock will change as you have protective gear on. But so far, we're not looking at any treatments. We will need to team up with better, more medical doctors in order to do that.
Cool, thank you.
There's another question from Joe. In car accidents, does the brain suffer from shockwave effects, and can it be simulated?
Absolutely, because it depends really how hard you hit your head, but you can have traumatic brain injury from falling. So you can definitely have it from car incidents. And what is interesting is that if the wave said that you hit your head here in the front, now the shape of your head is going to make the wave propagation inside the skull very interesting. So if you have a shock wave or another pressure wave, it will not focus where you think it will focus. So you might hit somewhere, but you get damage somewhere else. And this is important to understand also because of protective gear and where to look for damage and injury. So, and can it be simulated? Sure, there are some fairly interesting models right now for head trauma that people are using, particularly for sports, particularly for the NFL injuries that are occurring, that they basically equip these models with brain-like substances, and then they hit them. And they have multiple sensors, and they have the neck model to model like the motion of the head. But I'm pretty sure that one can do some really good stuff there. And what we wanted to do, our ideas here together with Dr. Stelios Kumlis, who is just now an assistant adjunct professor in the ME department, we want to also look at this using transparent models, so we can put particles inside different slices inside the brain, and then look at how the wave propagation influence basically stress and strain, and also accelerations. Because we think that just measuring an angular acceleration is not going to help us that much. We want mechanical properties.
I have one more of a generic question. So you have worked on an explosive side more from the military sector. How has been the investment of money and interest for the mining sector?
So
is it on similar scale, or is it now?
I am probably the wrong person to answer that question, because I'm not yet that included into the mining community. So I'm just now this fall semester, when I'm not teaching, reaching out to a bunch of people here in the area. So thanks to a lot of people in the mining engineering department that have put me in contact with different people. So we're trying to just make connections and start seeing how we can better train students, how we can better train researchers to make like useful education to keep them in this industry in the future. But I don't see there be any problems to getting funding for any of that, what we do for work. I just think it's a matter of just, writing proposals, asking people, talking to people, because we can do things that not many other people can do, which is pretty awesome. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's always nice to have you and talk to you. So,
yeah.
Is there any additional questions from the audience?
I was just at a last question, right? Just talking about mining in general. Maybe I missed that, but I didn't really see a lot of or anything on like fragmentation type for rock. As you said, you're not coming in from the mining background primarily, but I guess that would be one of the big areas of interest, right? That a lot of, and I'm completely out of the field. I've got no idea how much research is done in that area, but I would assume that like fragmentation analysis and better blast performance, that's kind of one of the big.
Absolutely. So, which is something I'm super interested in hoping that I can do in the future, because it goes right back into what I'm doing with dynamic fracture. So it's a different type of material, which is interesting. I'm always up for new challenges. So it's just a matter again of finding the right people to work with, and then sort of and then we'll just whoop up an experiment and then destroy stuff and try to figure out what happens during that short time scale. But there's been a lot of fragmentation work in also the polymeric world, where you can for example, just take a piece of paper. So if you have, you grab a piece of paper from a book, and then you take your pencil. So if you have a wood type pencil, now you only have a mechanical pencil, but if you take it and you slowly push it through your paper, how many cracks are you gonna get? Go home and try it later. So there's theories that determine the number of cracks, like at the corners, and depending on the size, different sizes and different speeds. So there's quite a bit of interesting work there, that you can see the number of sort of the spider legs that come out from after impact, or also after, say, if someone shoots a projectile into a shield, how is it going to fragment? So there's quite a bit of research done on that area, which is really beautiful. How many cracks did you get?
I don't know. Let's see.
You might also need a friend, to hold the paper.
Okay.
Okay, so try doing it like a tensile test, where someone holds the paper and then you push the.
Just got 2 fingers to get that. Okay. Yeah.
Do it later when you're safe and you can socially distance, if you don't have super long arms, you and your friend.
That's nice. So this is a curious question. So in the sector of fracture mechanics, you have worked on that a lot. The mining industry have typically looked at UCS and more intact rock properties for even rock excavation side. What level and what is your what level do you think you'll be working on? You'll be looking to work on the fracture mechanics side, because that's not what we typically look at when we say or define rocks and how it's going to fracture mechanics.
It's a great question, because I don't know yet. I think it's all serendipity. It's like, who do I meet tomorrow at the coffee shop and who do I get sort of introduced you to work with? Because I mean, I worked with the weirdest areas of people that work on Alzheimer's, people that work on neurophysicists, and it's a matter of, I think, opportunity and also like personal connections. And I think we'll just make anything work. But I'm interested in still dynamic fracture. So I'm interested in the initiation, like when does the crack initiate? What is it that drives the initial initiation? And then what is the crack speed? And in order to track a crack tip in the material, ooh, that's difficult. But it's a really fun challenge, because if you have to do it by hand and try to look at your pictures and decide where it is, you can't see the crack when it's opening. When you see it, it's already too late. It's already way up ahead somewhere. So it's quite a challenge to do this in dynamic modes, but that's where I want to live in the future.
Yeah, I could see that for a lot of the mining applications too. If you're actually doing scale type experiments that are I mean, don't necessarily need to actually do it in an excavation type environment, but like actually getting data, useful data on that. I was looking at the video you were showing with the naval vessel. If you just videotape it, it's kind of hard to actually get anything useful from just video information or picture information, right? It's a lot of the debris that goes around is probably just going to make it really hard to actually get valuable.
Yeah, so you need to put some kind of like quantitative measure on it instead of just having beautiful or interesting pictures. So I think a lot of the work we do is trying to make that happen instead of just showing like, this is pretty, now let's do the next one. But how can we actually, preferably automated process that we don't need to pay $60,000 a year to have. So like towards that, but yeah, it's really interesting how to use these high-speed cameras, because they get better every year too. I mean, right now we have 10 million frames per second available in the lab, and I mean, what is it going to be in 4 years?
Is there any? My research is around LiDAR, so I'm always seeing everything with the eye from a LiDAR sensor. Is there any LiDAR laser type measurement that's been done in the field, like penetrating dust and smoke and stuff like that? Would that be interesting for measuring? I guess the accuracy is completely different than. But if you look,
I still think it would be interesting. Yeah, I think it would be interesting, especially if you're looking at structures and say that we have these columns and we wrap them with carbon fiber and then we set off an explosive right next to it. Like, what's going to happen during that time of explosion and when the column may or may not fail? Like, how do the materials react? Because we won't be able to see anything due to fireballs, due to smoke. So we need to come up with different methods to determine what the dynamic response of these structures are. But yeah, so LiDAR also, I'm actually, you guys, some of you work on point clouds, I think, to determine like numerically how the LiDAR interacts with different things. So that's something I'm also interested in learning, and I'll learn more about it tomorrow, actually.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
I guess the temporal resolution of that would be, it's kind of challenging if you're depending on the scale, what you're looking at, and you need to collect points on the whole.
Yeah, but then I usually say that even 3 points is better than nothing, right? And if you can tag it along with some other type of technique, then that's actually pretty good.
So you're talking already about the Tesla of measurement techniques from your Volvo to Porsche to test on, all right?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes, yeah, you can just, I mean, you might just need a couple of data points in order to understand that if you're developing new techniques, that it actually works. So, yeah.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Veronica, in mining, we had one professor about 40 years ago. His name was George Clark, and he did a lot of experiments and at the University of Missouri, Rolla, and at CSM on the theory of shock waves and elasticity of shock waves and how they travel in the rock mass and there are a couple books on it also, and you may refer to it. And it has been a long time for me, but there are some initial early work in this area in mining.
Okay, this sounds really interesting. Would you mind following up with me later on this so we can chat a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I'll be glad to.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question, but I don't know if I'm jumping the queue because I have to be here from the telephone.
Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. My question, ma'am, was, are you able to get any useful information from historical tests that have been done? Like the Bikini nuclear tests, those nuclear blasts on ships, something like that. Did they get any data that could be used later?
Yes,
well?
I think what a lot of people are doing is that they collect data. They go through old papers and old research presentations to gather data, especially on like explosives work, and then to try to fit this data into different models and theories. That's very, very helpful because you might not have the money to perform that many tests with different settings and different types of explosives. So it's actually really helpful to use old data and to finding it. So I would probably give a shout out to Dr. Tony Konya. As far as I understand, he's really good at this field, reading through old publications and finding data and putting it together. So that's someone that is really doing this.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Eliasson. It's been